Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our meeting. It's Monday, August 28, 2023 at 1 p.m. I'm Cassandra Gandara, Mayor Pro Tem, and I'll be presiding over the meeting. Mayor is out of town. And so please stand, and if I can ask the public's attention, please. Thank you. If you please stand, and I'd like to just a moment of silence also to recognize our police officers and our fire who work tirelessly. I have a little piece of candy in my mouth, and that didn't go very well. But I appreciate everything that you do to keep us safe. And then will you join me to for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, one under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We always have a Pets of a Week segment. Do we have Amy on? There you are, yes, Amy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, Amy. Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing Pets of a Week and your training. You always give us some really good information.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But hello, everyone. My name is Amy DeFelix. I am one of the rescue coordinators for the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley. I'm also the one that picks and presents the Pets of the Week every week. And as always, I'll start by me sharing my screen. There we go. There we go. And I'll turn off my video so it doesn't cut out the text. Alrighty. And we always start off by presenting our cats of the week. And our cat of the week this week, his name is William. His number is 64952. And he says, "Who is this masked wonder that is ready to charm his way into your heart? It's me, William. I'm a small boy, only 5 pounds, and I'm a quiet, introverted kitty. I really want attention, but I prefer quiet companionship where you gently pet me while I'm in the corner softly purring while I kneel into your lap or a blanket." And his number is 64952. I don't remember if I've already mentioned that, but just for reference. And then our dog of the week, we have Mr. Chansey. His number is 59661, and he says, "I'm just a little bit shy, but I'm super sweet and full of love. I'm a quick learner, already getting used to being on a leash, and I'm even in the process of learning sit. I was in a foster home for a little while, and my foster found out that I'm cat friendly and I might already be potty trained. No messes indoors for me. I'm back at the ASCMV temporarily, so stop by and visit me this week." And then regarding adoption events, this is the last 4 days of Clear the Shelters. All month long, all adoptions have been $25, so they'll continue to be $25 until end of day, August 31st. We also have offsite adoptions at the farmers market this Saturday. We will be there from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We're usually located at the end of the farmers market, typically by Oregon Mountain Outfitters, like that end of the farmers market. So stop by and meet some wonderful adoptable pets. And now to continue with the disease prevention, I'd like to talk about canine parvovirus. It's another really commonly talked about disease, especially among puppies. So what is canine parvovirus? It is a viral infection. It is gastrointestinal. It only ever attacks the GI system, so like the stomach, the intestines, and everything else associated with that. It's spread by direct contact between a susceptible dog and an infected dog, or by a susceptible dog in contaminated feces, environments, or people. So like the fomites, like if a parvo-positive dog, you were interacting with it, hugging it, cuddling it, but didn't realize it was sick yet, you have the virus on you, and then you go and touch another dog, and then that's how it's like indirect kind of a contact that way. The incubation period typically ranges from 3 to 7 days after exposure. The duration of the disease is approximately 1 week. The most at risk are unvaccinated dogs and puppies, which are less than 4 months old. And I didn't write it down, but I do want to mention while the incubation period is like 3 to 7 days, the time it takes for a dog to either get over it or pass away from it is about a week. Parvo itself is a very resilient virus, and in the environment, it can last almost up to a decade, almost up to 10 years, just alone in the environment, kind of waiting to find a susceptible kind of a dog to infect. So it's definitely like dirt yards, grass yards. If there's an animal that has had parvo in it, it's really hard to disinfect and make sure that it's healthy for a new animal to come in. So that's always something that we ask to be aware of, because not many people know that it can last in the environment without a host for that long, and it's surprising, and it's a very difficult to manage. So what are the symptoms of parvovirus? It's usually lethargy, loss of appetite, abdominal pain, fever, or hypothermia. So either really high temperature or really low temperature, vomiting, and severe bloody diarrhea. Now, the severe bloody diarrhea is usually kind of the key sort of symptom for people to see from a puppy and think, oh, that might be parvo. Same with lethargy and loss of appetite. Because puppies, they're growing, they love to eat. They'll put everything down basically. So if you see a puppy and he's looking kind of low energy, not really eating all his food, and he's vomiting and has diarrhea, parvo is usually one of the first things that people kind of look towards. So how is parvo diagnosed or treated? A veterinarian will diagnose either through like the clinical symptoms, and also, of course, lab testing. We'll test the stool to see if there's any virus that is being shed that way. Treatment consists of supportive care and management of symptoms. Like, it is a virus, so you can't give medicine for it, essentially. Like, antibiotics don't work for it because it's a virus. So the treatment is mostly supportive care, keeping the dog hydrated, and getting in as much nutrients as possible to kind of keep him still at a decent kind of energy level while his body is learning to fight off the virus. So it's controlling the vomiting, diarrhea. So normally like an anti-emetic, something that will keep them from vomiting, something to firm up the stool, and as well as combating dehydration through fluids and electrolytes. So that's like the subcutaneous fluids that you see people do with a bag of like the lactated vinegar solution or something similar. And dogs diagnosed with parvo, like the ones dogs diagnosed with distemper, like we talked about last week, they must be quarantined to prevent spread, because it is a highly contagious disease, especially among puppies. So what is parvovirus prevention? Of course, like with canine distemper, prevention is the most effective route with maintaining and controlling the disease. So of course, vaccination, especially starting in puppyhood, revaccinating adults as soon as vaccines are due. So that's usually like every year. The distemper and parvo virus strains are usually in a combination vaccine. So when you get vaccinated for distemper, you're usually also getting vaccinated for parvo, and it's like a 2 birds, 1 stone kind of deal. You do not bring your puppy around with you in public until they've had their full set of vaccines and boosters and your veterinarian says it's okay, because you just don't know what's in the environment, and your puppy's immune system is very weak still, not fully developed, and he's not kind of ready to kind of take in all the pathogens that could be kind of waiting for him. And definitely don't let your dog interact with fecal waste of other dogs while out on walks or playing outside. I know dogs are just naturally curious, especially when you're out on walks and someone didn't pick up their dog's poop previously and your dog immediately wants to go and sniff it. Try to keep them from doing that, because you never know what sort of a bacteria or viruses, parvovirus or otherwise, that they could be sniffing, picking up, and kind of getting in onto themselves, and then hopefully not, but potentially getting sick with later on. So of course, we always encourage you vaccinate, and keep your pets healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, next up is our jobs of the week, and we have Giselle Palomares. Is she? Hi. Oh, there's Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing great. Let me share my screen for you all. All right. Can you see that?
We see the jobs of the week, just the title page.
Perfect. Okay, for our jobs of the week, everyone, we have several that have come up here in Las Cruces in the Doñana area. We have, for the city of Las Cruces, we have a case manager. The pay ranges from 45,000 to 64,000 a year, depending on experience, and that one closes on 9/11. Also for the city of Las Cruces, we have youth services administrator. That one, the pay ranges from 60,000 to 87,000, depending on experience, and also closes on September 11th. For White Sands Missile Range, we have a child and youth program assistant. That one pays $17.39 to $20.99 an hour, depending on experience. We also have an office clerk at Baird's Automotive. That pay was depending on experience. They did not list a specific pay. That one closes on 9/22. An automotive technician for Pet Boys. That one is $26,000 to $47,000 a year and closes on September 11th. And then finally, we have a financial analyst for the American Red Cross. That one pays $62,000 to $85,000 a year and closes on September 24th. And as always, you all can reach us on the website at employeenm.com, at our app that we have, and then at our office on Alameda Boulevard. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call, reach out to us. We also have a Facebook and we're reaching out to TikTok. So look for us there, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. No, sir, I'm sorry. I'm not able to get you. Sir? Sir, please take a seat. Paul, Mr. Borunda, and we'll sit. Mr. Borunda, please. This is a work session, and we're going to go through the agenda item, and I will give you a chance to speak on behalf of whatever agenda item you would like to speak to related to what's there. 3.1 Police Department OIR Recommendations Update. Hi, Chief Story.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Jeremy Story, Interim Chief of Police, for the record. Today, what we want to do is provide an overview of these 4 areas. I think we'll hopefully set some context prior to OIR coming up to give their update. I'll talk about training again, and the goal is to present the last 2 years, which coincides with the same period that OIR has been our auditor of training. Lieutenant Gutierrez with Internal Affairs will talk about policy updates or new policies that have come into existence in the last 2 years. We'll talk about some of the recommendations they've made over this last 2 years, and then what we've done to address them. And then I'll finish with what hopefully is a detailed explanation of our use of force review process as it exists today. The first slide up here is what is required for any police officer or law enforcement officer in the state of New Mexico. So this is the only training that is required of a police officer in New Mexico, which is kind of a separate topic. The first 5 classes, everything's on a biennium cycle. So it's a 2-year cycle. The first 5 classes say annual. Those are required every year. And then the rest of the classes are only required to be completed at least once during that 2-year cycle. We are finishing the 2-year cycle this year, so December 31st, all of our officers have to have this training to remain certified. This is the minimum. Now, even within these classes, there's a minimum number of hours, and in some of those classes, we exceed that. So for instance, interaction with persons with mental impairment is required to be 2 hours every 2 years, is minimal. We generally do an 8 to 10 hour class, and we spend half that time doing scenarios. The next 2 slides are going to be the training that we've done in the last 2 years that's above and beyond the minimum requirement. And this is training that's required of all LCPD officers. So all commissioned officers are required to attend these classes. We try to mix up the topics somewhat between each year so that we're hitting different things. In 2022, I'm not going to read everything. I'll try to hit a few things specifically. But the first one up there, critical legal issues training, was an attorney we brought in that did an 8-hour class. Kind of the high points of that training were trends that they're seeing in use of force as well as crisis intervention. Apologize. Same thing with 2023. I won't go over everything, but I'll try to emphasize a few things. The first class you see up there is hearing loss sensitivity training for law enforcement. That's a class that, one, was recommended by OIR based on a case review. We had been working with the New Mexico Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing since 2020. Due to COVID, it took longer than we'd like, both of us, to get this to happen. But in February of this year, they came down and all of our officers attended that training. There's 3 classes that say de-escalation. I just kind of want to separate those 3 and what the difference is between them. The first one was a 4-hour classroom course that was kind of a broad view of de-escalation. So they hit things like the use of cover and distance to slow things down, which gives you time. Time helps you to make better decisions and to gather more resources to help solve whatever problem there is. It emphasized effective communication skills, especially crisis communication skills. And it also talked about human performance factors, but really the importance of recognizing when you're overly stimulated emotionally, you're presented with a stressful circumstance, and sometimes our sympathetic nervous system can be too engaged, and that causes us problems. So practical mechanisms to help reduce that level of stimulation and bring you back so you can have more cognitive control. You can think better under stress. The second one, the scenarios, is just practical scenarios, what we call force on force. So that's practicing these same skills you learn in a classroom in a realistic environment. These ones were centered around traffic stops, but it's just presented with different types of interactions so that they can navigate through them. And the last one, de-escalation and subject control, is a class that was developed by our defensive tactics unit head, who was also our crisis intervention officer for many years. And this class was a recognition that sometimes force is necessary, but even after force is used, there's still opportunities to de-escalate. So they focus on how do I de-escalate during force and then immediately after force being used, which is a really good class. And the last one I'll hit on this page is fair and impartial policing, which is a company, but also the curriculum. We started teaching that in 2020. We just finished our booster training, our refresher training. And that takes an evidence-based approach to how bias affects all human beings and how sometimes those can be negative and how to minimize their impact in our decision-making. So those first 3 slides were the required training for all officers. And so now I'll make a distinction between that in-service training and advanced training. Advanced training is classes that are offered to anywhere from 1 officer to a significant portion of the department, but not every officer is required to attend. The next 2 slides are just going to highlight the classes that we either hosted at LCPD or we ran them ourselves. We brought companies in or we ran the classes, and so there's a large number of officers that attended all these classes. You can see that there's a heavy emphasis on search and seizure. That's an area that it's very restrictive in New Mexico, so it's difficult for officers to learn it to the point that I would like, and ultimately they have to know it as well, if not better than attorneys, because they have to make these decisions and apply the law sometimes in a compressed time frame. So that's been an emphasis. On this page, I just want to kind of highlight that a lot of these classes we do bring in companies, and there's a combination between, we have great instructors at LCPD, so we develop and run our own classes, but we also bring in companies, and that helps make sure that we're, 1, vetting what we're doing. It helps us kind of gauge our curriculum against what other people are offering, and so it becomes a checks and balances for our training. LLRMI is a company, Legal Liability Risk Management Institute. We brought them in for several classes now. Primarily, it's attorneys, although some of them do have law enforcement experience as well. So those last 2 were advanced training. I'm shifting to instructor training, and these are classes that we have either hosted or run and developed, or developed and run ourselves for instructors in the past 2 years. Instructor development is the class that's required for any New Mexico law enforcement officer who wants to become a certified instructor. The refresher is a class to maintain that certification. Outside of that, again, I'll just highlight a few things. Excellence in Police Training is a class that we hosted, that we brought in, and it's premised on evidence-based approaches to training in general and law enforcement training specifically. The use of force instructor class was a federal law enforcement training center. We just brought that in June. That's a 2-week certification course. We had, I believe, 18 personnel that attended, including our entire use of force cadre. I talk really fast and then I get dry mouth, sorry. And now I'm going to shift to supervisor training. So I'm trying to go as fast as I can so I'm not holding everyone up. But the next 2 slides after this will be our supervisor training program, kind of the framework of it. But this slide is the classes that we've done for our supervisors in the last 2 years. And a lot of that is to implement that supervisor training program. This stems from both a recommendation from OIR for better supervisor training and the recognition that there was, we weren't giving our supervisors the tools that they needed to be successful. In New Mexico, there is no required training to become a supervisor. So you could be an officer one day, a sergeant the next, with absolutely no training to help you. Traditionally, most departments require a first line supervisor class, which is a 40-hour class, which is great, but clearly not enough to make that transition. The one thing I will highlight is DACC began offering an accredited first line supervisor class that also counts for college credit. So although we send officers and sergeants to different ones, we try to encourage them to attend that one because it benefits them with college credit, and also is structured in a way I think that helps with learning. It's not just 40 hours Monday through Friday, which isn't the best for retention. The supervisor legal liability course was that company we brought in. That was a 2-day course that happened in February of this year. And the last thing I'll kind of really highlight is scenario-based decision making, which I think is the most important training we can do. That's how supervisors make decisions under stress in realistic circumstances or environments. So I'll explain some examples of what that might look like. That could be a supervisor walking into a scenario with role player officers that are in a bad tactical position. It's chaotic, and they have to walk in, establish control, move people around, get them in a better spot. They could be walking into a situation where there's an officer who's a role player officer who's overstimulated, who's clearly upset, and they have to recognize that, kind of pull them back, and then solve the situation. Or it could be a supervisor sitting at a table listening to a radio of a mock pursuit, and they're getting information, having to ask questions, and then make a real-time decision whether to allow that pursuit to continue or terminate the mock pursuit. So that's what we've done in the last 2 years. The actual program we developed in response to the recommendation is this, and I think it's realistic, but it's ambitious. For anyone who is on the list to promote to sergeant or who has just promoted within the first 6 months, a year at the most, they will complete all this training. So some of it it'll be spaced out, of course, not all at once. The first line supervisor class that we've always done will be the minimum. And then some of these other trainings that clearly will be beneficial as a supervisor. We also recognize that just because we do that up front doesn't mean they're set for the rest of their career as a sergeant. So an ongoing annual training, this is what we've developed. We've done a good job so far of implementing almost everything here. Internal affairs training has happened the last 2 years that helps with consistency and complaint intake and investigation. We just completed a leadership training that went great, that was developed in-house. The legal liability training, the 2-day class I mentioned, happened in February. Use of force refresher training happens next month in September. Tactical topic could be anything from less lethal deployment. It could be shield use for increased officer safety, high risk ops, anything around tactics, and then that scenario-based decision-making training. And just to kind of be my disclaimer to hopefully tie it all together, everything I presented is not all-inclusive list. There's several different types of training that happen simultaneously. So we presented in-service is what's required for all officers. Advanced training is classes that are above and beyond. And I gave you guys the classes that had a significant amount of officers that attended. But we send individuals and small groups to classes, conferences, seminars throughout the year, every year, including our civilian staff. We also send them to local classes, just in smaller groups that weren't on this list for those classes. It does not include training or policy review through our online learning management system. So there's a lot of policy reviews and little trainings that happen through the online system, which is a great tool for just refresher keeping stuff that's either needs to be refreshed often or that's just came out so we can get it out to officers quicker. It does not include briefing trainings, which are ongoing. There's a briefing training calendar, so every month has a topic that all the shifts are required to complete a certain amount of training on that topic, and then outside of that, they have leeway to do different trainings on different topics. We also bring in a lot of outside entities to conduct briefing training for our officers. Just in the past 18 months, think of the Crisis Triage Center, Mesilla Valley Hospital, the Light Unit came in, Ideal Options, Medically Assisted Treatment is coming in next month, CYFD, the compliance arm of CYFD for juvenile compliance. So that's an opportunity to make sure officers know either new programs, changes to programs, or statutory requirements that need to be refreshed often. And it does not include ongoing special unit training. All of our special units, SWAT, K-9, drone unit, motors, honor guard, they all conduct ongoing training that's documented separately, but that's on a monthly basis. And it does not include our minimum 17-week field training evaluation program or our basic academy. The last thing I just want to highlight, this is something that we're developing right now. is a police legal advisor and trainer position, a contract position that will just allow us to address things a lot quicker, more frequent. I believe that for learning, especially in search and seizure, there's so many different topics for search and seizure, use of force, that doing an 8-hour class once a year, although that's a lot better than not doing it, it's not often enough to ensure retention throughout the year when they need it most. So 3 things they'll be doing. They'll conduct that ongoing training in all these areas, including report writing. They'll identify trends through OIR review or internal review, and then they'll develop a curriculum to address it quickly instead of allowing it to become something bigger. And then they can discuss specific search and seizure questions with officers or supervisors. And one positive trend I've mentioned to other people is that in the last 2 years, there's conversations being had between officers and between officers and sergeants that just weren't had before on search and seizure. So they'll debate back and forth an issue of the law. They'll discuss, they'll throw out case law and then counter it. And those discussions tell me that it's working and that people are actually thinking about these things. But now they'll have an additional resource. If there is a question, is this the right way to approach a situation, even a hypothetical, they can contact someone who is an expert in New Mexico law and get some guidance before we make a decision on that. At this point, I'm going to introduce Lieutenant Rob Gutierrez from our Internal Affairs Division to go over policy review, the OIR recommendations, and then I'll come back and talk about use of force review. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Story. Does anybody have any questions on the dais for Chief Story at this point? Yes, Councilor Flores.
Thank you so much, Chief Story. So on page 12, slide 12, LCPD training doesn't include. There's the word doesn't include, does not include. So that isn't training if it doesn't include. So are those things you want to include in the future, or am I reading it wrong, or?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Flores, the preceding slides before this do not include these things. So these are things that we do that it did not cover on those first slides, just because it would have been too much information to put all down. So if you look at the first bullet point, the preceding slides only capture classes that are required for all officers, or a large portion of officers to attend.
Oh, I see.
Those slides do not include this information.
But all of that is part of the training.
Yes, ma'am.
It just didn't include it in the previous. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I was saying, wait a minute. So I did miss something, thank you. And my other question is, page 13, a licensed attorney to provide continuous training, and what is the context of that statement? Do you not have a licensed attorney who is knowledgeable in search and seizure and everything?
We do, and that's a good question, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Flores. We do. The frequency that we want it to happen at is just not tenable for all the other tasks that are assigned to our city attorney's office. So we have good attorneys that would be capable if this was their full-time job. We want something that is going to be ongoing, briefing trainings, full classes, 2-hour blocks, developing online learning management curriculum, responsive to questions as they come up. And if we want to do it at the frequency that I think will be beneficial for not only the department but the city, then a contract position is what a lot of other departments are going to, just so they have someone who that's a significant portion of what they do.
Are there other departments in the state?
Correct, there are other departments in the state.
Okay, and then the legal training you referred to in February, was that the one from Manning and Katz in Los Angeles, Missy Olin's presentation?
Mayor Pro Tem, Council Plus, that was, Missy Olin was the one from 2022 that was critical legal trends. It was.
No way. I thought it was just a few months.
I know.
Where have I been?
The one, the legal liability class was LLRMI, which is Jack Ryan's company. A lot of people know Jack Ryan is one of the most notable use of force experts. Right. So that was his company that taught that class, 2 separate companies.
Oh, 2 separate. But then you do have that type of training. How often is that when you have someone of those, like Jack Ryan and Missy Olin?
My goal is to bring at least one of those entities in a year. So that's always been my goal. We've done better than that. Like this year, we're bringing them for a couple different things, plus the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center class. But at a minimum, for legal areas, bringing an outside expert in once a year.
Mm-hmm. So, it seems, I think it was on page 12 that it doesn't matter where it is, but you do list a need for an attorney who is up on the search and seizure and all the different provisions in someone's rights. So So this is something I'm sure that you've presented to, spoken with our city manager in terms of the needs and the, because these aren't wants, I think these are needs.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council Flores, I've spoke to both the city manager and the city attorney, and we've discussed it in depth, and they've both been very supportive of it.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Councilor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you so much, Chief, for what I realized wasn't even an exhaustive list of all of the training that you're doing. Less of a question, more of a comment. I'm really happy to see the emphasis on supervisor training, but especially on field training officer, boosting that knowledge, because I think one thing I've picked up in the last couple of months, as you've been sharing, sharing more of the departmental procedures, is what culture setters FTOs are, in terms of how the officer out in the field is going to interact with the public and how critical it is. And I'm just very happy to see that you're emphasizing that importance and making sure that FTOs have the knowledge that they need. And then I also, I just loved the phrase overly stimulated emotionally, because I feel like I'm always overly stimulated emotionally. So I appreciate it. I'm going to use that one from now on. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
That's trauma language, Councilor Graham.
Yes, very good.
Very good. Yes, Councilor Bengomo.
Same. My therapist once told me I was emotionally high maintenance, so I feel like that's just. Chief, as you were presenting on supervisor training and what you said around you could be an officer one day and a sergeant the next, I don't think I actually fully know the hierarchy of the department. So it's officer, sergeant, lieutenant.
Deputy Chief and Chief.
Okay, and then so at supervisor, at sergeant position, you're managing staff and all of that. And does some of your training include those pieces on how to best manage a team, a staff?
It does, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo. A lot of the classes that are in there talk about it, so it's redundant and from different aspects maybe. So the first line supervisor class, it focuses a lot on that, on management of personnel, management of resources, the different areas of liabilities, failure to train, failure to supervisors, et cetera. But also the leadership training talks about that. The legal liability class talks about it. So it is hit in many different classes.
Okay, all right, that was my only question, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Bencomo. I have a question, Chief Story. Thank you for the presentation. You and I just had a conversation about training, so I felt like I knew about it. But we talked about CALIA training, the gold standard, right, that you are embarking on, and I think it'd be a great opportunity to speak to that and what it would entail, because some of this, I think, if we move, which is very extensive, very long, but worth it for sure, because they're seeing some great outcomes with it. Can you speak to that?
Mayor Pro Tem, I do not want to steal the thunder of Lieutenant
is
Gutierrez
that?
because there is a slide
Sorry.
towards the
Okay,
end.
a slide for it.
There
Okay,
is,
good,
because
cool.
it is important.
All right, I'll hold off. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief Story.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I gotta lower this. Rob Gutierrez, Lieutenant Internal Affairs. For the record, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm glad everybody is aware that LCPD, we're taking a lot of input from a lot of different areas. The goal here is for best practices to be put in place and used, not only for transparency, but for the good of the community and the good of the entire city for that. So we thank OIR for doing that. We thank citizens. And as Chief Story mentioned, we have a lot of input from supervisors, a lot of debriefs go on, and we get a lot of input. So going along with that, our very first slide is our policy revisions. Most of these, if you notice, they are self-initiated or internally initiated. Even though OIR has also mentioned a couple of these, they'll be noted in there. So we do look ahead. We do speak amongst ourselves and amongst the officers and what is the best practice. We go out and look. We're one of the only departments that have an actual compliance sergeant. They go out and look at case laws. They go out and look at International Association of Chiefs of Police information, and that has a ton of information from all over the country. A lot of police departments share their information, share their policies and best practices. So we compare it and see what's going to work for us. So not everything that is recommended will work for us. And sometimes we've tried it, or we'll try it again with a different approach to it. So keep that in mind. We review our policies annually, especially now with CALIA coming up. That is going to be one big requirement, that every single policy is reviewed and updated. As a matter of fact, to meet the compliance or to come in compliance with it, it has to have a pretty much a current date of when it was reviewed, changed, and approved before they come down and give us the stamp of approval. So I'm not going to go through every single policy, but you can see the code of conduct, you can see command and supervision policies, you can see operations divisions and staffing. Even the gym facilities, we've got new policies for that, peer support policies, use of force, complaint investigations, how they're handled, how they're dealt with. We are even looking at an alternative complaint resolution to speak to people as they're making them. We can come in and hopefully resolve it and pass on some knowledge to prevent any future misunderstandings, or just basically educate somebody that needs to be educated on things, or educate ourselves. On this, we even have the canines. We have lineups, show-ups, uses of force. Even once again, when case law comes out or Senate bills come out, everything has to be updated and looked at. Police service aides, sometimes inside of their own units, they request policy changes on what their duties are, or descriptions, or even adding police service aides. We didn't have them a couple years ago, so that had to be added. So we're growing in the right direction, and of course the policies are the main goal here. Now, with that in mind, we want to be a well-rounded department. So with that, Chief Story mentioned LLRMI, Legal Liability Risk Management Institute, and we also train with the Public Agency Training Council. Some of those policies and recommendations made by OIR is the training of internal affairs detectives, internal affairs supervisors. So we're actually using both of these companies to go out and be certified investigators, how to handle complaints, the intake of complaints, which is both an OIR recommendation as well as an internal recommendation that has been brought up. So the biggest changes is now all general orders apply to all LCPD employees instead of just commissioned employees. So anybody under our umbrella is now covered. That was the big OIR initiated change that we made. Standard operating procedures for codes and ACO, that was OIR initiated. Once again, bringing them under the LCPD umbrella completely. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them for time-wise. These are some of the OIR recommendations and what LCPD has done to comply with them, or at least we gave it a try as far as best practices go. Case disposition. There's a lot of citizens out there that didn't know what happened to their complaint on a preliminary. We just send them a letter and say, hey, your case was investigated. We didn't find anything with it. Now, through OIR and some of the other input, we're now telling you this is what we investigated, and it was sustained, not sustained. We didn't have enough evidence. We're using plain language now and telling you everything that we've done. And that seems to help a lot, and it answers a lot of questions. All right, once again, IA investigator training. All IA personnel are attending IA certification trainings, and that in the last 2 years has been yearly. So that fits in with the presentations that are going to happen today from OIR. We're including relevant, one of these days I'll learn how to speak, include relevant background information. We're quoting the laws of actually what we're referring to. Once again, we're not leaving you in the blind, we're educating you. This is the exact law, and this is what your situation was, so this is why we used it in that investigation. Pursuing verifiable details, and we're documenting all our steps. Before, if we went and searching for something and we didn't find it, We didn't use it, we didn't mention it, we didn't even say anything about it because we didn't use it. And now we're actually listing it. Hey, I made a phone call. Hey, I went to this place and it didn't turn up anything. There was no evidence there. So we're moving on. Once again, we're trying to be more transparent. Clay, now we're including the totality of the circumstances, the background information. We're trying to give you all the information that led up to that complaint. So now we're actually adding it instead of just our facts in the description. We're giving you the whole story now. All right, officers are being provided with all the tools, all the forms that a civilian might need. Private property crash forms were a big thing when people backed up into each other in Albertson's parking lot. The officers didn't have a little card to give them to put your name, insurance, location, license plate, stuff like that. Now they have it. Okay, simple little things that you wouldn't think or anything. I don't know how many times I've been out there without a pin because I couldn't even, write down somebody's license plate. Of course, we have cameras. But anyway. All right, so generate investigations as they come, as the information comes into our possession. We try to do that with everything, whether it be a citizen complaint, just citizen complaining to an officer. They come up and say, hey, so-and-so has said this, I heard this. Wow, we'll start looking into it. All right, so we're automatically going to start that. But before we even get to that, report writing was a big thing. Some of our officers, were leaving information out. So Blue to Gold report writing training is occurring now continuously, showing officers how to write reports, showing supervisors how to write reports, developing, we're developing an accredited report writing course in the academy that'll be a part of it. Basic writing skills we take for granted. Some people don't have it, so we're going to give it to them. OIR recommendations, once again, evaluate training curriculum for CIT and de-escalation. That was a big thing we had already been working on, but once again, it was brought to light. And then because of COVID and stuff, it took a little bit, but we made it happen. In-service duty to intervene, CIT classes and de-escalation classes are now required for all officers. Okay, and I think Chief Story hit on those pretty much. And now even the supervisors and some of the officers get annual IA training. Okay, we are actually giving the training because we're the ones that see the issues, we're the ones that see the complaint forms, or, just look at the policy and go, oh, this is why we did this. Okay, possible penalties. The complaint form, citizen complaint form was revised. It used to have penalties on it. It used to threaten you, basically. So the citizen might feel threatened and not fill it out because of the wording on there. Now it's friendlier towards citizens. So we are trying to be more transparent and doing all that. Now, counselors, to CALEA. CALEA is the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. They are the gold standard in public safety accreditation. They are an international company. Police departments in Mexico, Canada, Germany, and the United States are a part of it. We are in the self-assessment process. We started this in February of 2023, just a couple of months back. They give you 3 years to come into compliance with everything. There are over 500 accreditation points that we have to satisfy. Within those 500 points, for example, I can pull out 1 point. It could have 15 to 20 other points to satisfy that 1 point. So there's 500 items we got to look at, but in reality, it's well over 2,000-3,000 points that we have to hit. But the big thing is the policy. We have to revise them. They make suggestions. We are part of the Rocky Mountain Accredited Network. They are based out of Denver, but it includes Denver, New Mexico, and a little bit of Arizona. So we have people to turn to get any type of questions answered or better practice questions that we have in certain policies. They can help us with it, or even how to get accredited through the CALEA process. So other than that, that's going to be the end of my presentation right here. So I will turn it back to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Sergeant. And yes, Councilor Bencovo.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. Thank you for circling back to Kalia because I had missed that originally when you said it earlier. So who are, for this accreditation process, who sets their standards then? Are they going off of like federal government? Like who sets their standards?
The CALIA board, Mayor Pro Tem, City Councilors, they are a best practices collection center. So they
Okay.
collect their information federally, state, and from other local law enforcement agents. And their standards will meet federal, state, or local.
Okay, and you said this happens every 3 years?
No. Right now, we are in the self-assessment. We have 3 years to come into compliance.
see.
Once we come into compliance, they're gonna come down and do an audit. If, when we get approved, then it's yearly, they will pick 10 to 20% of whatever they decide, and we have to show them that we're still in compliance with them. And then on the 4th year, so it's every 4 years after we get the accreditation, they come in and do a full accreditation look.
Have we ever not been accredited?
We were accredited with the municipal league, but we've never been accredited with an agency this large.
Oh, so you sought this out?
Yes, the previous chief, Miguel Dominguez, sought it out.
Okay, great. That's really good to know. Thank you. I was not aware of that. In the revisions that you spoke about, you did mention use of force, and given that we've been talking a lot about use of force standard, that is one of the revisions that you'll be looking into?
Yes, that is almost yearly, almost monthly,
Okay.
every time case law comes out.
Okay,
And that's gonna be a big part of building the use of force cadre,
Okay.
especially with the knowledge base.
and then the other one I wasn't sure if I saw it on the list was around data and transparency on both on the collection of demographic data, arrest data, use of force data, and then on the other side of that, how then you make that transparent to the public. Are there policies around that you'll be
Ye-
revising?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Yes, there is. Every year, Internal Affairs puts out their annual report. It has all the information that they were legally able to collect inside that report. And it
Okay.
does have race, it does have information on it to
Okay.
answer your question.
I don't know if maybe it's up now, but I remember this being a complaint that a constituent had recently, that this year's or last year's hadn't been made public yet.
The number of complaints,
The report.
the IA report is published usually in March. And this year, we went through a change from LCPD officers, my office being in charge of the website, to the city being the website, and some of the stuff fell off. And it reverted back to an old website, so we didn't realize it for about a month and a half, 2 months,
Okay.
that it wasn't public.
Given that this CALIA accreditation process is fairly new for the department, I am wondering if there's an opportunity for public engagement to be included as you move through this process. Is that part of the conversation at all?
Yes, there is actually going to be a link on our website for public comment, and
Okay,
that is required by CALIA.
okay,
And it goes to CALIA first, they review it, and then they send a report back to the chief of police.
okay, thank you. And I can talk to City Manager Peely and Chief Story about this, but I think given this new process, I think it's a very good opportunity for more public engagement. Besides what they're sort of requiring, right, which is online, perhaps doing more town halls and things like that as you move through this process, I think would be really helpful. Those are all my questions, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. CALIA, what does that stand for again?
Commission on the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies.
And the makeup consists of,
Several former chiefs, a lot of top brass is out there from different countries, different states, and they make up the board.
so you mentioned Canada, I think, in
Yeah.
your, and so are there any say, law professors or social scientists or any other, I should say, professions, for lack of a better word, that might have an input as to how to set standards?
Mayor Pro Tem, City Councilors, Councilor Flores, yes, this Commissioners Board and the CALIA Advisement Group consist of attorneys, civilians, former law enforcement, former fire people, former public safety officers, emergency office management personnel, you name it, they have it somewhere on their input board.
Psychologists,
Yep.
mental health people, all of that. And, well, it sounds like a huge board. So how big is this organization, this commission? Is it international? Well, it's
It
international.
is international.
But does it meet in the US and Canada and other countries? And how often do they meet? And it's a commission comprised of a board? Or is it a commission, well, I don't know. Can you explain that?
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, City Councilor, Councilor Flores. The commission is very large. It is international. They meet anywhere from 3 to 4 times a year are the conferences for the actual police departments that are in it. They provide accreditation managers, accreditation officers with the training there at the conferences and so forth. The actual CALIA offices are open 365 days a year, and they meet through Zoom whenever the need arises, or there's full staff members. I do not have the exact numbers. We're so new to this that we're just trying to get behind what is needed for proofs. But they're very large. We went to the conference in Oklahoma City a couple of months ago, and they had 40 commissioners on hand looking over people that had submitted for accreditation. They have different teams, the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, Northwest. They have several different areas that are located, but within our region, they have at least 5 commissions.
And where is the location of the commission? Is it a building somewhere, or is it, what's the organization like of the commission? I mean, you said there's people from all over, but where are they located?
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, the regional managers, for instance, ours lives out of California. So he's responsible for the West Coast, you could say, on that. They have others that live in Texas, they live Utah, they live in Maine, in Florida, and they're responsible for their region. They report to a commission board of 4 or 5 for that area, and then the actual CALIA office, I forgot their address, but they do have a physical building where everybody comes in to meet. I mean, like I said, it's a full-time job.
Would you be able to give us that information or somehow get it to us? I'm just curious about the structure and the organization, because it sounds as if, it sounds like a good organization, and I just want to know if it's really covering, I'm sure, I hope that is definitely, I'd like to see some of their writings, some of their papers. And so if you could send us whatever you're able to, I'd appreciate it. Perhaps to the city manager or to our legal office, and they can distribute it to us however, whatever is easier for you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Sergeant or Lieutenant?
Lieutenant.
Sorry, I knew I would get it messed up. Sorry, Lieutenant Gutierrez. I'm excited about this CALIA certification. I've done some research and I've talked to a few organizations that have participated. Is there anybody in the state of New Mexico that is CALIA certified?
Yes, New Mexico State Police and currently Hobbs.
Currently,
Hobbs and Roswell. Doña Ana County Sheriff's Office is up for it. They'll be at the next conference, which will be in Washington, the state of Washington, sometime in November.
It's good. So can you explain what the outcomes, what sort of, it's obviously the gold standard, right? But what will we get from it? I'm thinking training, you've mentioned legal, kind of a legal perspective of kind of nationally and internationally. But what are you looking to gain from this?
Once again, we'd like to be known as the gold standard here in New Mexico for the police department. We are going to have access to national best practices. We're going to have access to better trend identification, and other people might already be experiencing the trends. So we're going to get all that experience from us. I can't go too much into detail on the legal side of things, but it'll reduce our liability because we are doing certain things. And
Thank you
that's
for
the big
saying
thing.
that, because I think that's important. And I would say, and what I've heard is that reduces like the excessive use of force in a lot of cases.
Yes, there is too much to go into what
Yeah.
they're going to reduce our liability in. So I'm just going to leave it as a blanket statement. It's going to reduce our liability and improve our transparency and the way we do business.
That's good. Yeah, no, I'm really excited that you are embarking on this. It'll be a huge lift, but I think an exciting one. And so I appreciate it, Lieutenant, for mentioning it and going over it. And I think it'd be great to put something together and send over to EFO about it. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would agree with Councilor Bencomo. I think having a more public participation that also, sir. Mr. Barunda, I'm going to ask you not to approach the dais like that. If you have something, please give it to our clerk. It's highly inappropriate because I heard what you told her, and it's inappropriate at this point. I'm asking you to not, Chief Story, can you please escort him out of the room, please? I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. Thank you. I told her that she was chewing like a horse and a gum. Chief Story?
Mayor Pro Tem, were there any other questions for Lieutenant Gutierrez before?
I don't think there is any for this particular presentation. Is there any for this particular agenda item? Do we have any public comment? I will give you 3 minutes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Mr.
I still have
Oh,
the
you do? I'm
last portion of
sorry.
it. And
I'm sorry, Chief Story.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Please proceed.
just hit something. There we go. Just to clarify on CALIA, I was informed there is a 21-person board. 11 of them are former law enforcement. The rest are from various professions, and they're based out of Washington, D.C. But we'll send some additional information.
DC?
D.C.
Thank you, Chief Story.
For the use of force review process, my goal here is to provide kind of what the process is as it exists today. I can say that 2 years ago, I think we had a good process. We have a better process today, and in large part because of OIR recommendation and inputs has made it a more thorough process. It has more redundancy built into it. So this is what happens when a use of force occurs. The first thing that happens is they're required to get medical attention, take photographs, and a supervisor is notified and reports to the scene. A blue team use of force report is completed, and that's separate from the incident report, what we would normally call a report. This is also true for a show of force, although medical attention is not required for a show of force unless there's something else going on where they require medical attention. Once that use of force occurs, there's going to be a minimum of two significant reviews. The first occurs from the sergeant, the first line supervisor. They are going to pull all the reports, all the photographs, watch all the videos related to the use of force. They're going to make a determination of one of several things. The first thing is if there are no concerns, the sergeant then sends it to the lieutenant for an additional review. It could be that the use of force was reasonable, but there are minor issues of performance issues. So they'll complete a deficiencies address memo, and then they'll still route it to the lieutenant to make sure the lieutenant's aware of everything before those things are addressed. And if there are concerns about the reasonableness of the use of force or other significant issues, the sergeant will complete a review request memo, and they'll forward it to the lieutenant, who then forwards it to internal affairs. So basically, this entire process then repeats with the lieutenant. So the lieutenant starts from scratch. They pull all the reports, the videos, the photos, and they do their own review. If they determine that there's no concerns, then they forward it to IA for documentation. Even if the sergeant forwarded it without any concerns, the lieutenant might get it and see that there's performance issues that they want to address. So they'll complete the deficiencies address memo and route it to internal affairs, and then we'll address that with the officer. The last thing is, if there are concerns about the reasonableness of the force or other significant issues, then the lieutenant can then do the request review memo and forward it for assignment to the use of force review cadre. So just to back up now, recap, at each level of review, both the sergeant and the lieutenant, there's 4 potential outcomes for any use of force. The first one is that the force is deemed reasonable with no notable performance issues, and then it's forwarded for documentation. The second is that the force was reasonable, but there are minor issues that need to be addressed. This could be a report that just needs some additional work. It's not a bad report, but they could use some additional training or a performance review with the supervisor. And in these cases, a deficiency address memo is completed for documentation, and then it's addressed with the officer and included in the file in IA Pro. The use of force was reasonable, but there are more significant performance issues, and so then a supervisory matter can be completed. That's kind of a level up from the deficiency memo, but not quite to the level of an internal investigation. And then if the reasonableness of the force is questioned, it's referred to IA and it's assigned to the use of force review cadre. And there's a memo that, a standardized memo that's used to document that. And then backing up to the use of force, the deficiencies address memo, there's 4 things we're looking at when we do that. These are for minor performance issues, but we either do an overall sit down with the officer and the sergeant will go through the incident with them. They'll look at specific general orders that maybe they need to refresh for the officer. They'll look at any laws, statutes, or ordinances or case law that's involved, or they could do a formal training request so that they can address whatever issue they saw that needed to be addressed. If a use of force is referred to the cadre, 3 members do a thorough review. So it's a panel review. They all look at the use of force independently. All the videos, reports, they look at case law, and they come together after reviewing it individually, and they discuss it. 1 member drafts up a report, and the other 2 either concur or dissent from that report. If the use of force is deemed unreasonable or out of policy, then it generates an internal investigation, and that's where you'll have findings on specific policy violations in the internal investigation. Kind of went through it fast, but I'll leave this up here as I stand for questions from that part. That QR code takes people to our transparency page. We've been working on it, still always going to be a work in progress, but it's come a long way in the last 6 months. And there's a lot of information on there. We're trying to make it more user-friendly to find it, but there's no lack of information on the transparency page. And at this point, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Chief Story. Any questions for Chief Story? Oh, they're very quickly trying to get on the QR code.
Hopefully it's still working. Okay.
Chief Story, I wanted to go back on slide 26 if we don't have questions. Okay, Bencomo, sure. Slide 26, could you talk to me about the deficiency memo? I can't say that very well. Deficiency memo. What does it address?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Is it like a standard document that you
It
kind
is.
of form fill? Okay, can you
It
talk to me about
is a standardized
that?
document, so it'll have the case number, the blue team, the use of force number, who's involved, the sergeant that's referring, or the lieutenant. And then it'll have check boxes with one of these 4 things, and it could be more than one. So it will kind of lay out what the issue was. So if it was report writing, it will say report writing, and then how they're going to address it. And so it's just really, it's documentation for things that were already occurring, but it's to prove that we actually are doing these things. And it's kind of a check system for the supervisor. And then IA has it, so they know it's associated to this use of force, and they know what was done to address the issues. And again, these are for fairly minor issues, but we want to address those before they become bigger issues.
So this could be, say, for example, myself, there's something there, I called you, we moved through the IA process, there's some deficiencies, And if I say, Iprid, you could get a copy of that deficiency memo with all the specifics.
This will be
Yes?
part of their personnel file, so generally it's not subject to IBRA,
Personnel
but
file.
it will go into the IA file. But we have it for documentation. when needed.
Okay, okay. All right. Yes, Counselor Binkelmo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I just want to thank you as well. Thank you. Thank you all. Chief, I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted at first, but I don't think you went super into depth about the cadre, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know that there's a piece in the OIR report that we might hear about later that you added additional members. I think a total 16 now. Can you just talk about like the selection of those officers? Will they be in rotation? Just a little bit more about your thinking behind the cadre.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo. The cadre, we had 16 people that went through that 2-week Let's See Law Enforcement Training Center. The cadre is at, I believe, 8 members now.
Okay.
We are also doing apprentice members that are not young officers, but younger officers, so that we can get them the experience before they're actually writing reports. So with 8 members, any given use of force that goes to review is assigned to 3 of them, and that allows it to not be overly burdensome. The members are mixed, so it's not the same 3 people all the time. And they all have extensive training. Now they have varying levels of training. Some of them have, 10 plus use of force, significant use of force review classes or investigation classes or instructor classes. But all of them have a baseline of use of force review or instructor training, as well as a lot of human performance issues, knowledge in the law, search and seizure specifically. And they're also vetted based on their own performance, of course, as an officer. So any given 3 get an assignment, they review that independently, and then they come together, and one of them will write the report for that use of force, and they'll rotate who actually writes the report.
Interesting. What if there's disagreement amongst the 3?
If there's disagreement, so obviously if 2 concur, then that's the finding. The third person can dissent, and they can provide a memo of why they disagree, and that would be included. But ultimately, if it's majority, so 2 out of 3.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Counselor Binkelmo. Anybody else on the dais? Okay, I will take public comments specific to Chief Story and Lieutenant Gutierrez's presentation. Anybody? Yes, Mr. Goodwin, please make your way down. I'll give you 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. I am, for the record, Peter Goodman, and I'll be brief. Mostly, I think that was a great report. I want to highlight and amplify a couple of points they made. One is Kalia, which I've done a little research on too, having talked extensively with Sheriff Kim Stewart about it, and recognized, I'm glad your question elicited, that there really are only a couple of other entities in the whole state of New Mexico that are part of it. It requires a whole heightened level of consciousness and care, and it is the gold standard, and it's to their credit that they are going for the gold. They mentioned transparency. I want to commend them on one point that I see as a journalist, which is that while the Sheriff's Department has been very good about, if there's an officer-involved shooting, Kim Stewart calls y'all in, all the press, and shows what video there is and says, here's what we know at this point. I won't speculate on other things, and maybe some of what I say will be proven wrong, but here's what we know right now. Whereas the LCPD has said, basically, go pound sand, we're doing an investigation. No, we can't give you any videos. And the last couple of times there's been a shooting, these folks have acted as Sheriff Kim Stewart did. And I think that's to their credit. I hope it continues when there's a case that's not such a slam dunk that the police were so clearly right. And I think it will. I'm impressed so far with Interim Chief Story, and his approach to training, I think, is good. I do hope they move dealing with mentally impaired up from every 2 years to every year, because that's a big part of their weekly diet. And I want to add briefly that the one thing that's still missing is real public input. They're doing they're improving things. ORR is making a material contribution to that, but we still need serious public input that will bring in more complaints than the system as it now stands will get, because people won't be as afraid. It will identify problems and situations that may not come up through the normal process. It will also reassure the public more about the police and help the police communicate with the public. That goes both ways. So I still urge you to take that idea seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Yes. Hi, Reverend Caroline. One more. Carolyn. How are you?
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. And Mr. Goodman stole a lot of what I was going to say.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, yes. My name is Reverend Carolyn Wilkins. I'm a minister of Inspirational Ministries here in Las Cruces and a part of New Mexico Cafe. But I'm standing here as a citizen, and I appreciate the report that was given. I see greater opportunities with the processes that are going to be put in. And my question, well, it's a compliment for all the things that are being done. It sounds like a lot of things have been taken into consideration, but I also encourage there to be public input and be happy to help make that happen. But the other thing is something I hate to bring up, but around the country there continue to be shootings, and there was one yesterday. And my question to our leadership here is whether we have active shooter training involved in the process. I didn't see that come up in the processes that were discussed. I hope we don't have to use that, but I'd like to know whether that's part of our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Carolyn. Chief Story?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, I'm not going to go all the way back. Internally, we do active shooter training at least every 2 years for the officers, but we also offer it for private businesses or organizations, churches, so they can contact us and we can set up training for our citizens as well.
Thank you, Chief Story. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, and I think our next is 3.2, fourth semi-annual police audit report presented by the OIR Group, Viola Perea. Hello, Ms. Perea.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. My name is Viola Perea, City Auditor, and today we have two members of the OIR Group with us to present their fourth semi-annual report. I'd like to introduce, excuse me, let me get the report here. There we go. I'd like to introduce now Teresa Magula and Stephen Connolly.
Good afternoon, welcome. We're very glad that you're here in person, that you made the trek.
Well,
Are you from here? You're not, are you, right? No, California? Yes, that's what I thought.
so good afternoon. Are we gonna be? Do you want to be down? Are we gonna? Okay, you're making me nervous there. So good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. My name is Stephen Connolly on behalf of OIR Group, and I'm here with my bashful colleague Teresa. Actually, the last time we were in town was in February, and Teresa was in charge by herself. I actually contracted COVID just a few days before we were scheduled to be out here. So She said that she would be able to handle it, which was not wonderful my self-esteem, but she did a great job. And I'm already feeling better than I did in February. So whatever happens from here is all gravy. And I also just want to say that the structure of today, I think, is working out well, because this is the first time that we've had a presentation from the police department prior to our report. I could absolutely sense the relevance of a lot of the things that Chief Story and Lieutenant Gutierrez were going through in terms of the meat and potatoes of our concerns. And certainly a lot of the things that we will be covering in our presentation are reinforcements. We certainly, Teresa and I weren't looking at each other like, what is this guy talking about? This is not our experience at all. We have actually had a very positive sense of the department's responsiveness and receptivity under Chief Dominguez and with Interim Chief Story as well, and we certainly hope it continues. But all the things that have been accomplished in the last couple of years are certainly very encouraging to us in a number of ways, because we think the department is making important progress, and if we have played a role in that obviously that's very satisfying in its own way as well. So we're happy to be here. And next slide, please. Good thing Teresa's here. So just to refresh people's recollection about us and who we are a California-based outfit. There is a team of primarily 3 of us that are focused on Las Cruces issues. It's Teresa, myself, and Michael Giannacco, who's sort of the founder of OIR Group, and he certainly sends his regards. He's traveling with another project this week. We have been doing this kind of work in some different contexts for some of us for up to 20 years now. And we are not police people ourselves. We are not former police officers. We come at this from a variety of different perspectives, but we have developed some expertise in what we call police practices, because the only thing that we do is focus on different issues of law enforcement policy and practice and independent auditing of different aspects of policing. So we have different relationships with the different cities and counties and places that we work. And the model in Las Cruces is a unique one for us in some ways, but the opportunity to look at and provide public transparency with regard to every citizen complaint that falls within our scope of work is a different thing that we don't have in other places. And I think it is an important element of transparency and a sign of the city's commitment to oversight that is meaningful and hopefully useful to the public as well. So we have had an affiliation with Las Cruces since May of 2021. And so this is our 4th time being here with you to report in person. Oops. There we go. So in terms of the actual audit, so the way our contract is set up, we come twice a year to talk about a particular published report. We publish reports for the public twice a year. And we come to speak about that, and the substance of those reports relate to cases, as the slide says, that fall within a particular time window. So it's cases that were completed by the Las Cruces Police Department, investigations that were completed during this time period. And by the time we get them, the cases are done, the conclusions have been reached, and our role is to assess those completed pieces of work and in an effort to provide transparency and maybe some recommendations about best practices for going forward. We're there to look at what's been done, to provide information to the public about the allegations, about the department's response to the allegations, about the outcomes of the cases, so people can see what the decisions were, and we share our views of whether those decisions were appropriate based on our understanding of the available evidence and the policies that were applicable. So our transparency is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish, but as was, I think, reflected very, very gratifyingly in the police department presentation that preceded us this afternoon, a lot of what we're trying to do is offer recommendations to say, hey, there are ways we're seeing things in these actual complaints that people have, these actual incidents the department is involved in, and we have some ideas or insights based on these actual events about potential changes that could be made to improve your systems in one way or another. And so Teresa will be talking about some of the substance of that, but the recommendations that accompany our reports, I think, are a key part of our role here. And then one of our functions is to report on demographics. When we got started, there was a concern about saying, hey, can we take some of the information that is gleanable from these events and see if there are any meaningful conclusions to be drawn with regard to some of the issues that I think are very important around the country, and certainly in Las Cruces as well, as far as potential bias in policing, disproportionalities in who's frustrated with the police and why. And so there are some demographics that we provide with each one of our reports as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to talk about some of the specifics of this most recent report. And then we're going to take a step back and talk about the kind of the overall 2-year summary of our experience here. And as I say, a lot of it will be reinforcement of things that you've already heard this afternoon. So Teresa, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Teresa Magula for the record. I'm Mayor Pro Tem and councilors, really just honored to be here again today. Love seeing you all again, so thank you for having us. As Steve mentioned, part of the work is the explicit cases that we received in this period. So I'll go over some of the details of those before we take that step back and look at the 2-year perspective, which I think is probably the most interesting piece of what we will speak about today. But certainly every complaint is important in its own unique way. And so in this particular audit, we looked at 10 cases that were completed in the period. There were 8 formal citizen complaints. So these would be complaints that are coming in from the members of the public who have had an experience with the Las Cruces Police Department that was less than satisfactory. And that might range from something like a code of conduct allegation. The officer was discourteous, for example. I didn't feel that the officer was listening to me when I was explaining my situation and so forth. 2 of these cases involved use of force related allegations. And so as we've mentioned in the past, and as Chief Story mentioned, we do not regularly review the department's uses of force, except when they are the subject of a complaint investigation. So in this particular sample, we had 2 cases that involved use of force related allegations. And then we had in this period, and this is the first time we've experienced this in your city, 1 case that involved an allegation of racial bias. This case revolved around a traffic stop in which the complainant believed that he was targeted specifically because of his race. The investigation found that there was no evidence to support that particular allegation, that there was no racial bias or motivation of a race-based nature from the officer's perspective. And when we reviewed this, we really take these as an important piece of an important component of the complaint system, because these are particularly important for us to be looking at. What we noted with this is that the department did a really commendable job in investigating the allegations. They looked at kind of the whole scope of the traffic stop to see what the circumstances were, what could have explained the traffic stop, if not race bias, and provided what we thought was a very comprehensive letter to the complainant, which included, and this is unique, an apology for the way that the complainant was made to feel as a result of that traffic stop. Now, I say that's unique because it's something that we are recommending in other jurisdictions. An apology can go a long way. Even if you are looking at the department's policies and the actions of a particular officer and finding them to be within policy and within reason, that person is left to feel a certain way. And we felt that the apology was appropriate in this case. We also felt that there is opportunity in these cases to perhaps go a step further. You heard Chief Story mention and Lieutenant Gutierrez mention the alternate complaint resolution process. And we felt that perhaps this was a case that would have been appropriate for that. Have that individual, should he feel comfortable, come in and speak about the experience. Come in maybe view body-worn camera footage, and have that kind of mediation and engagement with the department that could help to satisfy some of the concerns. I'm not saying that the complainant should have felt any other way than he felt, but some of these steps can go a long way to repairing that damaged relationship. We also then saw 2 internal investigation cases. So these are cases that the department itself identified as being problematic, issues that were raised internally. Both of those were code of conduct allegations. Okay, so those were things, for example, one particular incident in which a cadet was engaged in some unfortunate behavior related to some off-duty behavior, and that was brought to the attention of the department. The department handled it. So out of these 10 cases, we saw 20 allegations, right? So every case might have a number of different issues that are being identified. And of those, the majority of them, as you see there, 12 were exonerated. That means that the department found that the action as alleged did occur, but was within department policy, procedure, and practices. 6 of them were sustained, which means that the behavior did occur and was found to be outside of department policy, practices, or procedures. And 2 of them were unfounded, which means that the allegations as they were told were found to be not true or had not happened in the way that they were articulated. And as we said at the outset, we found that those were appropriate findings based on the evidence that we reviewed as well. As Steve mentioned, we like to report out to you on demographics. Really what we're looking for are there any trends in these different statistics that might indicate to us that, it's a particular area that's being targeted and that have complaints about the way that they are being treated by police? Are there particular races that we're seeing are having a disproportionate amount of complaints filed? Are there perhaps any indicators that the officer's race is an indication of how that officer may treat a particular complainant of a certain race? And overall, as we're looking at demographics over the course of 2 years collectively, we haven't identified any trends that would have us be concerned in a statistically significant way that things are going sideways in a way that we're concerned about. That race bias, as I said, was the only allegation of its kind in 2 years. And we're not seeing any trends that would indicate that that's something that should be on our radar, although certainly we continue to look for those. We had 15 LCPD employees in this time frame. You can see there they range. One of them, as I mentioned, was the cadet, and we had 2 non-sworn employees in this period as well. The officer race, again, you can see Hispanic, white, and Asian across the board. And as I mentioned, the data does not suggest any pattern of practice or bias with relation to the race of the officer and the citizen. As I mentioned as well, those 6 sustained allegations, the outcome of those was some form of verbal reprimand, and that was accompanied by a directed training. So we heard today, very appropriate to hear that presentation by Chief Story around all the types of training that are occurring. Directed training is one of those categories. So aside from all of the training that the officer is receiving on a regular basis that's required by the state and beyond, a particular officer may be directed to a specific type of training. So you have issues and deficiencies in report writing. We're going to train you specifically, officer, on report writing skills. Yeah, so they match those 2 up. One of the things we've been most gratified about is that in some of these cases, by the time we see them, they're closed. They're complete, the findings have been issued, whatever appropriate action has been taken. And sometimes we are looking at that and saying, yeah, that was appropriate, and you could have done a little bit further, another step, to have some retroactive debrief of an incident. Perhaps the officer wasn't directed to training because it was found to be within policy, but maybe we flag that and we provide that officer a little one-on-one counseling or training. And to its credit, in each of the cases that we recommended that, the department has assured us that they have done that type of retroactive debrief or training for our suggestions. So we're encouraged by that level of commitment, even if the finding is not sustained. And then finally, we had 2 employees that resigned. Of those named employees, it was for unrelated matters, but the employees are no longer with the department. And finally, just demographics on the complaint side. You can see there, they're from throughout your city. Some of them are from out of the area. 2 of them are anonymous. Makes it hard to know where they're from. And again, similarly, the civilian race of the individual who's calling or complaining. Again, with the anonymous complainants, we do not have a way of tracking that. Back to Steve.
Thank you, Teresa. So the second part of our presentation really is to touch on or reinforce some of the ideas that have already been shared about our interactions with the department and our efforts to improve practices on a going forward basis as a result of some of the completed materials that we've been able to have access to. And our impressions are very positive in this regard. I was actually talking to Mr. Giannacco at the end of last week before we came out here, and he said this is certainly one of the clients that we have that we have seen the most concrete examples of a police department saying, thank you for the idea, we're going to accept, and then they actually follow through and do something about it, which is great, rather than just nodding and smiling and then it's kind of business as usual. I think that this department really has engaged at the nuts and bolts level to try to say, hey, we'll give that a try, we like that idea, and hopefully they have felt like it's helped the process, but it's been great for us to see. And so our idea, I mean, there's been some talk about CALIA and the whole accreditation process. I know that's a very big step for this agency, and it was clear that your council had a lot of interest in it, which is great. Our goal has been from the beginning to say, hey, based on our familiarity with these things and the different agencies we've worked with and the ways that we've seen it that might be different or maybe an enhancement of your internal review processes, we've made recommendations with the idea that this department certainly has the potential to be as effective as any that we work with, and that's always the backdrop to our interactions. And then this idea of the whole mediation and alternative complaint resolution, that's a concept that has actually ended up being relevant in a lot of the cases, because a lot of the issues that end up being complained about are not the ones that are really headline grabbing and egregious in terms of their terrible officer behavior or the significance of the use of force or the consequences that occurred. But certainly to the people who were involved in the interactions and who are unhappy with the department on some level, the things that they are complaining about, the bad experience they had with the police, it matters a lot. And one of the things that we notice in a lot of these cases is a lot of times we can absolutely understand where the department was coming from and the officers were just doing their job, no policy violation. But we also really understand the complainant's point of view and why they were put off by what happened and why they didn't understand or appreciate the way the department responded. A lot of times it comes down to communication and understanding, and the whole idea of mediating these things and having a third party just get the two sides to talk about it and to understand each other's perspective, we think is sort of beneficial as a concept. And just in terms of the actual substance of many of the complaints that we see, we think it might be a relevant process for this community. So in terms of best practices, again, we are pleased to say that when it comes to some of the key issues that we've identified in the investigative process, the department has been extremely responsive. We're very committed to, we review, when we get all the materials, we will look at the complaint and break down the complaint itself so that we are trying to understand, and certainly if there's been an interview with the complainant, we want to know exactly what it is that the complainant was upset about And we want to make sure that the department addresses each one of those issues in its investigation and response, and not have one slip through the cracks or just focus on the major one or what have you. And the department has definitely improved in that regard. We're very interested in the value of interviews, whether it's with actual LCPD personnel who are involved as witnesses or subjects of an investigation, or with witnesses and complainants themselves. So that interview process, I think the body-worn camera has done a lot in terms of providing conclusive evidence and eliminating the need for some of the interviewing that happened in the past, but there are places where we have flagged it and said, hey, some follow-up might have been beneficial here, or the body camera didn't really capture what this person was concerned about. So that's something that we have talked about the department about, and again, they have worked to be responsive. And obviously, the fundamental underpinning of all of it is the whole idea that the investigations be fair, that they be unbiased, that they are objective. And so if we see any little glimmers of, frustration with the complainant or conclusions that get arrived at just because we're unhappy with the complainant, or the complainant has also done something wrong, we certainly want to try to emphasize the importance of balance and objectivity. And again, the department, we've been pleased to have the sense that the department is responsive to that when it's appropriate. And I'm going to turn it back over to you.
We like to keep you all guessing as to who's going to do the next slide. So Lieutenant Gutierrez provided this amazing list of policies, and certainly with CALIA accreditation coming, as Lieutenant Gutierrez mentioned, there will be a revision and a review of all of the department's policies. And certainly we find that the complaint process is one way to have that review mechanism triggered, right? So if in the course of a complaint, it's flagged that a policy should be looked at, we've seen that both through our recommendations and the department's receptivity to those, that it is triggering that policy review process. One of the chief examples is the policy around working with individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. And that may have gone unnoted for years and years, except that there was a complaint filed where the individual was hard of hearing and had an unsatisfactory experience. And that triggered the department to look at that policy. So certainly we see that these are really important features in triggering that feedback loop. The department presented a variety of different policy updates. We have recommended changes to their use of force policies. I've spoken to you in the past, some changes around use of the RAP device, some changes to the CEW or TASER policies. And then we've looked at some of these post-force processes. So what happens after the use of force occurs, and what are the best practices around those? So Chief Story provided that outline of what happens afterward, and we find that that's very responsive. It also aligns with best practices that we've seen. One thing that I want to note is Chief Story mentioned that it's a supervisor that responds to the scene. We find it of particular importance, as does the department, when it's possible, to have an uninvolved supervisor responding, right? Now, that's not always a possibility given the resource constraints, but when it is, we certainly want the department to be providing that uninvolved, unbiased perspective. If you yourself have directed force, it's awfully difficult to review that from an objective perspective. The other policy areas, again, many of them were already listed. Questions around the domestic dispute or civil standby policies, as I mentioned, hard of hearing, use of social media by officers. And then, of course, we saw that amazing list of training that is being developed and given as a response to some of these recommendations. And when the department updates policy, it's of course of paramount importance that the officers receive that, right? It's one thing to do it, in your research and development branch. It has to get out to your personnel. And the department, as you've seen, is doing a really commendable job getting that out. We have also looked at all of the different positive things that have come out of this. So certainly we have a critical eye, and we have noted that there are some really positive trends. Again, as the department presented earlier, there is just this continued improvement in the quality of investigations. We just learned that there is a new temporary staff assignment to internal affairs to increase that unit by 1. It will provide more timeliness in the investigations, and so that the reviews can happen in a faster way. We receive them faster, they can be reviewed and returned back. And again, that ongoing commitment to training IA personnel. It's a distinctly different type of work than any other type of investigation. And so that specific training is important for those who are assigned to IA. The chief talked about and answered some questions around the deficiencies noted memo. We think it's a fantastic process. We recommend that the department use that for more than just uses of force. So certainly if there is a deficiency noted in any type of performance, particularly around complaints, we would like to see that used. Even if the department is doing training, is doing debriefs, if it's not documented somewhere, I just have to take your word for it. And we're really big on evidence and documenting. So that deficiency noted memo is a huge bonus to have that documented and be able to look at it not only from a department-wide level, but from a risk management and liability level, right? You can look back and see what was this officer trained on, debriefed on from their personnel file. And then, of course, again, responsive department-wide training, whole laundry list provided by Chief Story, which we're really pleased to see. Back to Steve.
Okay, this is the last switch, I promise. So just a couple more slides. I think a lot of the news is very favorable, as I hope that you have gleaned from our presentation on top of the departments. At the same time, obviously, with any entity, any organization doing the kind of complicated work that the department is doing, there's certainly room for continuous improvement in that whole idea of how can we make our processes be even more effective. And in terms of some things that we have flagged in the past and that we're going to continue to keep an eye on, one of them has to do with the timeliness with which investigations are completed. That's a significant issue for us in terms of our sense that if you're a complainant, the notion that the department is taking it seriously and is addressing issues in a timely, legitimate fashion is going to turn in part on how quickly the department gets back to you and is responsive in terms of what their own process has been. Similarly, if an officer's conduct needs to be reviewed, needs to be corrected, needs to be addressed, taking care of that in 2 or 3 months instead of 9 or 10 months, I think has value for a lot of obvious reasons as well. So to be clear, we haven't come across situations where the department has missed the statute, like they've lost out on the opportunity to complete a case or to discipline somebody because they took too long. But at the same time, we've seen a number of instances where we look at the incident and the complexity of it, and like, why did it take 4 or 5 months for this to get started in the first place, and why is there a way that we could improve some of the arc of these things so it's a little bit more efficient? And the department, I think we spoke with Chief Story about that within the last couple of weeks, and he sort of recommitted to sort of recognizing that as a concept and something that he is obviously interested in addressing as well. And then the whole idea of the disciplinary matrix, one of the things that we've noted in the past is there have been instances where we were surprised at the relatively lenient outcomes for cases, that the conduct seems fairly significant to us, but the consequence was relatively minor in our view. So the department has committed to developing a matrix where they're going to have a baseline of outcomes for certain kinds of policy violations. It's good for the officers to know what the standards are, and hey, this is what happens. This is how seriously we take this policy, and it's going to help promote some consistency from case to case, it's been an ongoing project. In fairness to the department, it takes a lot of effort to build one of these and to coordinate with the association and the lawyers and to make sure that you're doing something that makes sense. but we will continue to keep an eye on that as it evolves. And last but not least, we've already alluded to the whole idea of alternative complaint resolution as an avenue that seems to make sense to us for a lot of the individual disputes that have come across our desks in the time that we've been here. And it's something that we hope the city will continue to consider. And as far as this is the last slide, I promise. We are continuing to follow in terms of the thoroughness of the IA process, and we've touched on this already. There have been big strides made in terms of adding to the evidence collection process and also to some of the explanations. There are things that made sense to us when we called and asked and said, you know, why did this come out the way it did? I don't get it. And then there was some missing pieces that were known to the department, obviously, and influenced the decision making, but weren't necessarily clear from the memo, didn't provide a very effective record of the department's own thoughtfulness and the validity or the rationale behind the decisions that got made. So they're front loading a lot more of that stuff and relying less on, you know, common knowledge that isn't common to us and that didn't necessarily explain or justify some of the outcomes. And then the whole idea of IA staffing is something that we've already talked about. Continuous training on the effectiveness of investigations and the intake process and all of those key components so that the community has belief in the credibility of the process. Those are all things that are ongoing and that I think are again, continue to be worthy of attention. And we're very enthusiastic about the force review cadre. That's how we first had the opportunity to meet Interim Chief Story, I think it was last year when he was kind of put in charge of developing that. I think it's something that he cares a lot about, and I think it will pay some real dividends. That emphasis will pay dividends because it's such an important part of the department's functions. So that is all that we have, but obviously we welcome any questions from you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. How is it that you go through these cases, these situations? Do you have a menu to pick from? Do you meet with say Chief Story? How is it that you select the cases that you review? Or do you select them, or are they handed to you?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor, for the question. We have a particular scope of work for this engagement, and so we receive every closed complaint that rises to the level of a Category 1 external complaint. Those are complaints that are received from members of the public to the department that rise to a level where misconduct might have occurred.
And for purposes of transparency, and that's why I'm asking these questions, how do you know that there aren't any others? With all due respect to the department. But I just want to get that out because we have members of the public present, we have the press covering this, and it's very important for all of us to know how it is that these, you know, to make sure that you have, that there is transparency.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor. So we are comparing to the department statistics related to the internal affairs annual report that Lieutenant Gutierrez mentioned. Aside from the demographics and the statistics that the department is providing, we're not going in and looking through files or listening to voicemails, but we have the assurance of having worked in this type of engagement, both here and in other jurisdictions, that those are being sent to us in the appropriate way.
Okay. You know, you answered that question very well, but there's still questions in my mind about the selection of the files that you receive, the cases you receive. So there's also, you touched on racial profiling. And as you know, the city of Las Cruces, or this area, is predominantly Hispanic. So do you have race-on-race sensitivity training? I mean, is that something that you recommend? because I think that there are times that in my studies, you know, undergraduate, San Francisco and all that sort of stuff in the 60s and 70s, you know, there's just because you're Hispanic doesn't mean that you're not going to be racist against another Hispanic. It's that self-hate that is imbued. And so I was wondering if there's that kind of sensitivity training that you have recommended, because our police force is predominantly Hispanic, and our population here is predominantly Hispanic, Latino, Mexican, Mexican-American, Mexicano, Spanish, you name it, but, you know, everything but Anglo. So is there that kind of recommendation? Were there any cases that suggested that and that would give rise to that kind of a recommendation?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor. So certainly one of the things that we continue to look at are those kinds of demographics to see if any of those rise to the surface, where we're seeing, you know, perhaps as we're watching the body-worn camera video, that there's something that's not quite right with that interaction. We have not seen that type of you know, race on race, as you're mentioning. However, it's my understanding that through the department's implicit bias training, as well as a variety of their other types of training in that same vein, that they are looking at those types of biases that an officer may have just inherent to him or herself, and how those might have an impact on the way they are treating the people with whom they contact. So certainly I think the department is aware of those. We have not flagged that as a particular concern or recommendation based on what we've seen in the cases so far, with the exception being that racially motivated traffic stop that we spoke of. And so certainly we're keeping an eye on those things. We watch the totality of body-worn camera footage that's provided so that we can look for those types of nuances and make certain that if something like that arises, that it is appropriately framed and addressed.
Great, thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
And Steve, you mentioned effective processes. How do you know that the processes are effective? And this also goes to the question of the services that you have contracted for. They're not as extensive as you have contracted with other cities. I think Anaheim is one of them. I think it's throughout, I don't know, definitely throughout California. But so how do you measure? How do you measure the effective processes, the outcomes?
Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor, thank you for the question. A lot of it for us comes down to access. And one of the things that we do have in Las Cruces, within the parameters of the scope of work that we have, is complete access to the relevant materials upon which the department makes its decisions when it comes to these complaint investigations. So we are able to review all of the relevant body-worn camera recordings, all of the relevant police reports, all of the interviews that the internal affairs investigator may have done, or if they're not there, we can ask why they're not there. And we have the opportunity to interact with members of the administration as well to ask follow-up questions if there's an aspect of the case that we're not seeing and think that we should be seeing. So we have a sense of how a thorough, rigorous, full-scale complaint investigation should look, and all of the different steps that should go into that, beginning with the intake interview and the framing of allegations, and then the investigative steps that are taken, and then the deliberation and outcome. We are able to track all of that through the department's case files that we have access to.
That you have access to.
Yes.
That's a qualifier.
Yes. Well, so, and to your point, ma'am, you're absolutely right that on some level, you know, there's if everybody were in on a conspiracy to keep things from us, but you know, the department is accountable to other city departments that are in contact with us, and a lot of our materials are shared with the city attorney's office and other entities. And so if there was something out there that a complainant, for example, like, hey, I don't understand why my very serious allegation isn't reflected in any of this, and we became aware of that, I think it would be very problematic for the department and for the city, and it's a scenario that people would want to avoid. So yes, I think it's conceivable that that things are being kept from us, but I think there are so many checks and balances within the city and so much risk associated with that kind of an intent that I am confident that that's not a problem here.
Okay, thank you. And then in review of some of the investigations that your OIR group review, they seem to be the ones I've reviewed, I haven't reviewed all of them, are pretty mellow in comparison to some of the stuff we hear. And then as far as effective processes, does that mean you're going to talk yourself out of a job? You're going to be so effective and we're going to live in, Disneyland here or something, or some kind of a la-la land?
Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor, thank you for the question. The idea that someday we will have done such a great job of making recommendations, but we really do genuinely, apart from whether it's us or somebody else, we think there absolutely is value to have an independent check on some of these things for two reasons. One is for the accountability and objectivity and the transparency of it. But two, just because a fresh set of eyes is always going to potentially provide added value and insight, and it doesn't have to be an intentional withholding or an intentional bias on the part of an agency that they miss things or just don't see it the way the public is seeing it. So having those outside participants, I think, is always going to have value.
So do you have, how should I phrase it? And this is not in any way to criticize you or to criticize our department, but the eyes of the public are upon us. And there are 3 people in the room in particular, maybe 4, who I'm not sure that they would be asking these questions, but I think they might be or would like to have answers. The cases that you receive to review, given the size of the city, given the size of the police force, given the size of the population, is it comparable relative to other jurisdictions, other municipalities? I don't know if you have other cities that have the same characteristics we have here, but are they representative? And of like, if there could be a comparable municipality? I don't know if you do any of that.
So I would say 2 things, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor. You actually just reminded me of something you had said earlier that I wanted to respond to as well, which is, if there is a concern, I think you made some allusion to things that you are hearing, whether it's at meetings or in interactions with individual constituents. If people have concerns about the department or about individual incidents that you're hearing about that sound like, wow, this is concerning, and I wonder what's obviously, unless that person is flagging it and saying, I want to make a formal complaint, then that's not going to be, the formal investigative process isn't necessarily going to begin. So I think one thing I would say to any members of the public that are listening is, please do take advantage of the complaint process that the police department has, because they are obligated to do a thorough, objective investigation and to respond appropriately if there's officer misconduct. And we are here to make sure that that process is happening. So if there's things that are out there that aren't being reflected in our reports or in the run of cases that you're coming across, that's interesting to me and concerning potentially. So, but again, I would say please use the system and we'll see what happens from there. And then in terms of how Las Cruces compares to other jurisdictions, I think obviously it's a one-to-one comparison is different because there are so many variables that go into it. But I would say that there is the cases that we have seen are fairly standard, fairly representative in both volume and severity and the outcomes. So I wouldn't say that the city is an outlier in any direction, certainly not in a concerning direction.
Great. And then, we've had some cases that are known to the public, but I won't use the name of the cases, but, or of any of those cases that went public and have gone to trial. And have you, and hopefully we won't see those situations again, but there hasn't been anything truly outlandish in terms of the cases that you reviewed. Certainly not the ones I reviewed here. So,
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I would agree with you on that, yes.
yes. Okay. Well, I do hope that, I really hope that your presence and the work you do with our department, police department, for whom I have a lot to be thankful for a lot of reasons. But I just hope that your continued processes definitely reveal or help our city, help the residents in our department. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you both so much. Welcome back to Las Cruces, and for your work with us. I do just have a few questions on the report. I was sort of just very curious right now regarding pretextual stops and data collection on that. It's my understanding New Mexico does not have a requirement on vehicle stop and data collection by departments. Do you know that? Do you know that, Chief? Anybody? You don't think so, or you don't know? Right, there's no state requirement. Okay, that's what I thought I had found as well. So I'm curious about our internal, so maybe there's a question a little bit for you as well, Chief, but to me, as I read these, it's good to know that you haven't found a ton of patterns really in any particular place. I think maybe the one place is the delays from a complaint to an interview, right? Like that's probably the biggest pattern that I have seen so far. And so that's good, but given this one particular case, it just made me start thinking about pretextual stops and how hard is it to do data collection on those kinds of things? That's my question. I don't know why I made it seem like I had more. That's my question.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor. So, we are based in California where there is a requirement to be reporting on those types of demographics related to traffic stops. And the data is slowly coming in. Agencies are just now, especially the smaller agencies, coming into the need to comply with that. And I will be straight with you that it is difficult to know. So certainly some jurisdictions are finding that there are disproportionalities in the way that traffic stops are being conducted. There are some agencies that are taking a very proactive stance on that. So LAPD, for example, put out a department-wide policy that requires officers to articulate on their body-worn camera exactly the rationale for the stop prior to doing the stop, so that there is a clear record that there is sufficient cause to conduct that stop. So agencies are kind of responding in their own ways, but it is certainly a difficult type of complaint and allegation to investigate because you have to go into the mind and the intention of somebody, and if that individual is not forthcoming about that intentionality, then it's difficult to find those out of policy. And so what we're seeing almost nationwide is that there is a very low to no sustained rate on allegations of racial bias.
That's hard.
Yeah.
So Chief, given that there is no state requirement, does a department have data collection on vehicle stops?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo, we have shifted in that direction after OIR. The uniform traffic citation has blocks for that. Of course, the person has to self-report, or you have to make an assumption about their race or ethnicity. And sometimes your obvious assumption is probably correct, and sometimes it's not. In Las Cruces, we found that we are fortunate in the sense that we are a very mixed community. So, I mean, there's a lot of even within the department, my wife's Hispanic, my children are, they identify as Hispanic, so it makes it difficult for accurate reporting, but we are doing what we can to move in that direction. And a part of it is compliance with that person if we physically ask them what their ethnicity is as we fill out the traffic stop, or the citation.
And I guess the other side of that too is even if we were like, oh, we're mandating that we do, pretextual stop data. On the other side of that, there's data collection and then data analysis, right? So if you're collecting data and it's just sitting there and no one's looking at it. So I'm curious, so I briefly saw the California rule, and state agencies have to report their data to the AG's office. And so I'm curious, we don't have that here obviously, but so then where does the data analysis sort of come in to figure out if there are patterns of racial disparities in pretextual stops?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Como, I think one important distinction to make between California and New Mexico is in New Mexico, pretextual stops are not legal. And so many other states have to collect this data because they are legal, and so they want to make sure there's not a pattern. I think even on the federal side, there's a push, even though they're legal in the federal system under the Fourth Amendment, to encourage officers not to conduct pretextual stops. But in New Mexico, it's kind of a moot point, because if the traffic stop is pretextual, it is proved that it's a pretextual stop, it's illegal under the Article 2, Section 10 of the New Mexico Constitution. So it makes it a little bit easier where we don't have to necessarily track data on pretextual stops, because if it is truly a pretextual stop, then there's an issue.
Oh, interesting. Thanks for the additional context, Chief. Okay, I might have some more questions for you on this some other time, but I just had quickly done that search and had found that. I did have a question for you all, and again, maybe Chief, for you, this one as well. I found one recommendation you made really interesting on reviewing body-worn camera footage with the complainant. And I actually wondered if on one of the cases that would have been appropriate. I think you mentioned on one of them, but I wondered if on the case of there was a domestic, and then the officer fell with the young woman. And I sort of wondered if that would have been a case that could fit here. And if, Chief, I'm wondering how you're thinking about that recommendation and if you think it's doable.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Como, we are taking that recommendation as something that we totally agree with. I think that's, and many times that will be an appropriate resolution where that person will get more satisfaction. Again, it's going to be voluntary. OIR has provided 2 sample policies, which are way more extensive than I thought they would be, because there's a lot of factors that go into it you probably don't think of, or I didn't think of right off the bat. So I want to be thoughtful in how we implement it to make sure we do it correctly, but we are moving towards implementing it. It's just establishing our own policy, and luckily we have some models, so we don't have to start from scratch, but they're a lot longer and more extensive than I thought they would be.
I bet, totally. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I know that you respond to some other recommendations, and this one wasn't clear whether you were sort of accepting it or not, but I thought it was sort of a great recommendation to sit down with the complainant, and I appreciated your frame around sometimes people just want to be heard, right? Sometimes people just want to be heard that, look, I felt this way, and then sitting down with them and reviewing it, I think is an appropriate response. And then, Chief, while you're here, so you don't have to sit back down, on the disciplinary matrix, I'm wondering where you are on that, and I know you have tons of things on your plate, but I'm just curious on the timeline.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Como, I actually meant to present it to them earlier, but we had a change in where we met. So I've been provided with approximately 60-page draft disciplinary matrix policy.
Wow,
I have it going up to the Mexico Municipal League Conference, and so I'm going to take it with me so I can do some reading at night. But I haven't gone through it yet, but I do have it in hand finally, and it's extensive, so
okay.
It's a good step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you so much. And actually, I think that's, no, I guess my last question was around the one pattern you found, and if you have any further recommendations on the timeline between complaints made and interviews.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor. So one of the things that we were gratified to see is that Interim Chief Story pretty quickly identified that there's a need to increase that staffing so that those timelines can be shortened. And certainly one of the things that is important to do is keep that line of communication with the complainant. So we understand that sometimes the staffing, the level of of work that is ahead of somebody might have you be delayed on that, but communicate that to the complainant. Hey, we got it, we're on it, and it might take us a minute to get to you, but we acknowledge that your complaint is of paramount importance both to you and to us, and we want to let you know that it might be delayed. So on both sides, the department is increasing the staffing so that those investigations can happen in a more timely way, and then sending out those letters when an investigation is going to exceed that window that we think the complainant might be going. Do they forget? Do they not care? Am I not being listened to?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your context. And the last thing I'll say, and this is more for City Manager Peely, was around a couple of us had requested that we expand your scope of your contract. And so I just wanted to reiterate that the specific ask was for 5% of use of force cases to go to you, and then all uses of lethal, deadly force to come to your contract. And so I was wondering if you had an update on that.
And you, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Como. So we do have something to present. There were two things were, as you mentioned, Councilman Como, use of force, and then community outreach. What we're proposing right now is the community outreach portion. As we take a look further on that use of force, there's some concerns that we needed to iron out. We talked about this in our Public Safety Select Committee. There's some concern about cases that aren't closed and having to review those that aren't closed and pending litigation. And then, with a 3-year, if we were going to extend it out to 3 years so that it could be past the pending litigation issues, then the question would be, would it be too far in the future to be effective at all? And so those are some things we're still working on with the use of force. I think we felt concerned that it wouldn't be appropriate right now to bring that forward. But what we do have is we have an agreement ready, an amendment ready right now to at least address address the community meetings. Up to 4 is what we're proposing. 2 would be at the same time. We have the 6-month report, and so they'd be here anyway. So what's written in our proposal is that they'd have a meeting scheduled at the time they come each time, and then up to 2 additional, so it'd be quarterly meetings.
Okay, that's great. On the community engagement piece, and I mean, now we have a new city attorney, welcome. But I guess I continue to have concerns about the decision-making that's happening in Public Safety Select Committee, given that it's only 3 city councilors and that we're not able to have that wider conversation with the rest of the council, when several of us have sort of said, yes, we do want to expand their contract. And so while I understand that there's like in the weeds things to figure out, I feel like there is a way. And so I will just say that I'll raise the concern that about the decision-making happening in a closed committee.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Como. One thing we did mention, and there's other ways to provide feedback and input with independent of the contract, and outside this particular contract, but other ways to maybe check the boxes there that doesn't put the city in potential liability or.
Well, I mean, given that the biggest liability is on use of force, and given that the OIR contract has already yielded incredible recommendations that the department has already implemented, I can only imagine the kind of recommendations they can give on something as heavy as use of force and how we can continue to improve. And so, but if right now we're only internally doing that kind of audit, I think it's critical that we have external eyes on some of these pieces. So that's where I say, right, not from a punitive sense, but from a how can we do better sense, and not only protect constituents, officers, and public dollars.
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. I will say that I met with Linda today, and it was on our list to talk about related to public safety, all the closed safety select committee meetings, the oversight, and the finance, to do her legal review and see that we're within our rights, because she's a completely new attorney, and I think it's important that we have that done. And I was asking for a public safety select committee at that point to be open. We did talk about extending the contract with more cases, but we are very concerned about liability. I think we all need to be, particularly that cases that don't have that 3-year mark.
And I, I'm new to the city, so I'm just used to what I've known before, but I just would caution everyone from discussing our communications in public and the potential waiver of attorney-client privilege.
Well, the public knows I've been talking about it outwardly at council meetings, so they know I wanted to make sure that the public knows I am following through with that item. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
just because you referenced your conversation with
Yep.
me, so that's what gives me concern.
Aren't you going to share?
I did.
She holds a privilege, doesn't she?
With that, I have a couple of questions. I appreciate your presentation and all the work that you've done. I'm seeing sort of some patterns from the 2 years, and it's around sort of the recommendations that you have made to Chief and the department related to sort of those next steps that you could, like for example, on page 16, speaking to the State versus Ochoa case and sort of some of the other cases that, well, if law enforcement would have taken it the next step, maybe a supervisor having communication and understanding. And I think that's really what the public wants, right, is that sort of opportunity to build relationship with our police officers, and then hearing from IFO about opening it up to hear more from the public. And so I like the idea of especially around the CALIA certification, and not just having a link, but really opening it up to the public to be more involved in the presentation and the idea of looking at different policies and what might that look like. And I think in talking with Chief Story, he has been really open about, I don't know if you're aware, but they started to do meetings with the public, and his willingness, along with staff, to continue those, I think, are going to be really important. The other thing is, I wanted for you, or maybe this is for Chief, you had recommended sort of that mediation and restorative justice practices, and I was interested to hear around the restorative practice component, what that might look like in relation to at least page 15, your page 15, and that particular piece where supervisors would take complaints from the intake, maybe take it a step further. Can you talk to me about what other jurisdictions are using related to that piece?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So we work with, as you know, a variety of different jurisdictions. As Interim Chief Story stated earlier, he requested and we sent over some models of these types of programs that we've worked with.
Okay.
The one that I think is most effective that we've seen work is the City of Davis, California. The way that they are engaging in that restorative justice program is for complaints that are appropriate for the program. Okay, so there's a whole, as he mentioned, the kind of qualifiers of what would make it a case appropriate for that are fairly extensive. We certainly don't want to be diverting cases that could result in some kind of misconduct to a nice conversation instead, right? But in these cases that are appropriate for that type of restorative justice, the city is contracted with an outside mediator who is very experienced in facilitating these conversations. And it looks like a number of different things. First, all parties have to be engaged and receptive to the process. So that means both the officer and or supervisor and or lieutenant, sometimes even up to the chief level, being willing to sit down for the conversation, as well as the complainant being willing to sit down for that conversation. And they literally have these around the table, very transparent and authentic conversations about how one was made to feel. The officer may share his or her intentions, training experience, maybe own past-based trauma that had him or her react in the way that he or she did. These are really extraordinary sessions of just human-to-human communication. And I think that that's the type of program that we would like to see happen here for your city in the cases, again, that are appropriate for that level of engagement with the community member.
You talked about maybe 5 cases that could have been appropriate to do so. So would these be certified mediators that we would contract with, and maybe you have a list of them that could possibly do it, or how does that? We have a list? I mean, how I know a couple that mediate, but I don't know in these sort of. I would say they're very prescribed, right? Very specific. I'm assuming. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So certainly there are people who specialize in this type of work, and you know, I am almost certain that here in New Mexico there are a variety of very qualified individuals to do that work. It would be something that you would decide internally with the department as far as contracting with an individual like that. You know, that would be something that, again, we could advise, but it would be a role that you would take on council with the city manager, with the department as well.
Of course. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And then I was especially interested in the social media complaint, and the reason I am is because I've received countless complaints about it that I talked to EFO about, and I don't know, and this has been over a span of time, like maybe over a year, maybe the 2 years. I try to be cognizant of the times, but since COVID, I can't seem to really. Yes, I'll keep blaming it on COVID. But have we addressed that through social media, the social media policy specifically? Maybe this is more for Chief Story, because I keep seeing it come up, and I feel like it's a piece of the disciplinary point that maybe what you made earlier, and that I really want to own in on.
Mayor Pro Tem, both the policy was updated for social media use,
Okay.
and all training, actually verified this the other day, all training was conducted and completed by all officers this year, earlier this year,
Okay,
in response to that complaint.
okay. And then the disciplinary piece,
On
how
that,
are we going to address that? Is that how you're going to speak of that particular matrix of discipline and what that might look like, and the training and such? Can you give me a little more specifics on that, Chief?
for the discipline, Mayor Pro Tem, for discipline specifically, it lays out for each policy violation an appropriate discipline and takes into consideration mitigating and aggravating circumstances. As you can imagine, that gets complicated, and that's why it's at 60 pages right now. But that would include violations of the social media use policy.
Okay, okay. And then I wanted, since I had you up, standing here, the non-sworn employees and that issue of laughing and whatnot, they don't have to wear cameras. So how do we handle that, and without, right, a sort of video on that? Was it just sort of, did it amount to he said, she said, or he said, whoever brought the complaint up?
Mayor Pro Tem, for many of our non-sworn personnel do have cameras, which is helpful. So all of our animal control officers, our codes officers, and our
Okay.
police service aides have them. So then it would just be the civilians that fall outside of that, our victim assistants, records personnel, et cetera. So normally there is video evidence one way or the other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then the written, I think, I'm trying to to stick with a sort of overall arching theme around patterns that I'm seeing over time, and it continues to be around the written documentation or a lack of documentation specifically. Can you help me understand how you're moving through changing that and assuring that that there is the proper documentation? Because I think there's always that backstory. And please, I mean it with all respect, I've been an administrator of many people, and that is always a big deal. And how well, we were backlogged hundreds of cases, right? And it was always impressing upon the employees the importance of documentation and just so that you get just a really good understanding. And when you do finally get the backstory, it's like, okay, I understand that. So how are we working through that? And I'm saying this because I think there's technology, and if there needs to be more support around that, around resources and such, I'm happy to hear that and move through that with you all around budget cycle time.
Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate the question. So there are a couple components. Documentation, I agree with you. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. It doesn't matter how great the training was or how many people attended. If it's not documented, they essentially didn't exist. For our incident reports, it's always been an issue. We want better reports, more documentation. I think it has to be like a multifaceted approach to it.
Yeah.
So obviously, if there's a specific issue with a specific officer on a specific incident, then we address that through a training referral review. But in general, we've changed our entire reporting structure. So we're using a different technology, which was approved by council last year for this budget year. And that, I think, requires the officers to be more engaged in the entire reporting process. We've also done a lot of training, as we alluded to. Again, a one-time report writing class probably does have a positive effect, but it's not going to drastically change what they do day to day. So we're hopeful that we can just make it constant. And I always say it's like when you have kids, if you tell your kids not to do something, they're probably going to do it again. And probably 10 times after telling them, they're probably going to do it again. But at some point, it generally sinks in. And so we're training from different ways. We have our intel analysts talk about the importance of documentation, from classifying, assigning crimes to detectives, reporting to FBI, how it's important there. At the shift level, they're doing it. We're bringing in outside companies who specialize. And then that police legal advisor, that'll be one of their big areas, is to really emphasize report writing, especially when we're documenting a search or a seizure, whether it's a use of force or just detaining somebody. That's where we see a lack of documentation hurt. And ultimately, it hurts the officer because they're the ones who are going to be questioned. And if they had reasonable suspicion to detain them, but they didn't put it in the report, they didn't articulate it, ultimately it's going to make their life harder, as well as the department and the city.
Chief Stewart, thank you. I can really appreciate that. I still supervise social work intern students, and I've noticed sort of the gap in the training that's happening from the school to the internship. And so I always talk about, you might consider a DAP or SMART method, some method that helps you, because if you're one that's long-winded, you're going to write all sorts of things that may not pertain to the actual incident. So I'm assuming that this training has sort of techniques and methods that officers and supervisors really could fall back on.
It does. Our analyst has a framework that they use. The Blue to Gold has a separate framework that they present. So ultimately, they have a few different. With the new technology, there's templates that assist with prompting officers to make sure they're not forgetting critical information. I think that's very helpful. So when they have that template, they know that they can't leave it blank. So either it applies or it doesn't. And if it does apply, they need to articulate how it applies, what the information is.
Thanks. And then, Chief, the force review cadre and the blue team, are they different or the same?
They are. The blue team is it's a part of our internal affairs software. So the blue team is what is the report for the use of force. The cadre is going to look at, so that blue team is what the first line supervisor, the lieutenant reviews, everybody involved in the process. That's just a report that's documenting what happened. But really what they're looking at is the incident reports, the videos, photographs, because that's what's going to tell the story of what happened. And they're comparing that to the blue team use of force report. So they're not just looking at the blue team, because that would not be a thorough review. So when the cadre gets it, they would look at everything, including the blue team. But that's just one component of it.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. And then, Chief, on there was a particular case that was reviewed related to a female juvenile and her mother. And I'm wondering if there was an opportunity, and maybe it happened, where light could have been called out to address that. And I know there's some, I think there have been some concerns over time about the child welfare, you being called out for safety checks and those things. And I know some is questionable here about age and, you know, the age of the female. Is that something that you would consider, or it would have been appropriate in this instance?
Mayor Pro Tem, if I have to look at the timelines.
Yeah.
One, I think that probably happened prior to light being active.
Oh, yeah,
And
I
I
think
don't
you're right.
know,
Yeah,
I don't know if that's something that currently, based on the framework, that light would respond to. I will say in general that officers are recognizing when there's a use for light where light would be appropriate at an encouraging rate, and so they're requesting light even if they're not initially dispatched on a wide variety of calls. So they are looking for those opportunities based on the parameters that were given to us by fire and the light unit. In that case specifically, I don't know.
it happened before. You're right, as I looked at the date, for sure. Chief, I just want to say publicly how much I appreciate your willingness to meet with me and the openness and transparency. I think the public wants that accountability and transparency. I love the QR code, getting right, you know, to that information. I think is going to be important. I'm excited about where you go from here, especially with the CALIA certification. I think that's going to be helpful. I think it will really help us sort of reduce and mitigate the risk and the litigation, and so appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you both. Those are all my questions. Any other questions? How about I'm sorry, yes, Teresa.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. If I may, because there's some concern, counselors, around people voicing what they are experiencing with the police department. You know, certainly filing a formal complaint with the police department would be the preferred avenue, but I understand that for some people that is just not a reasonable ask. And so I would like to highlight your city ethics hotline, which is a way that individuals, should they choose to file a complaint, can call that city ethics hotline. They can be anonymous. Certainly we would appreciate that, you know, if it's within the individual's capacity to provide a name, that would help for a more robust investigation, certainly. But we understand that it might not be feasible for someone to contact the department directly.
Yeah.
And so I would really encourage community, if you're listening, if you have issues that you wish to bring, to use that city ethics hotline. It has been a source of complaints that we receive and review, so.
Thank you, Teresa, for the reminder. And maybe if I can, Viola, can you speak to that, specifically the number and what the process is? I know you've said that. You've talked about this in other areas, but I think it's important to speak to it now. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, Viola Perea, City Auditor, for the record. My apologies, I did not bring the numbers specifically with me. However, you can locate both the online web portals as well as the telephone numbers in multiple areas on the city website.
Yes.
We have it in over 30 areas across the website. If you just scroll down to the footer of just about every city department page, you will find both 800 numbers for the public website and telephone number, as well as the employee, website and telephone number, as well as the public website and telephone number. All of that information is sent to a third-party facility who will gather the information, whether you do it verbally over the telephone or enter it on the computer yourself. They then gather that information, create the report, and then that report is sent back to the city's hotline committee. There's 4 individuals that information will go to individually. Our hotline then determines how to disseminate that information for investigation. It does allow the ability to remain anonymous, which they have every opportunity to do, or they can provide information such as a name, an email address, or a telephone number, so we can contact them directly if we have questions. However, I would like to add, if the individual does remain anonymous, At the end of the intake process, you're able to get a password to enter the system again, so you can check back into the status of your complaint. That's where we communicate. We'll communicate through the system, and maybe we have additional requests for information. Maybe we have some clarification that we're needing. Or maybe if the case is sent to, say, an outside counsel, for example, we would give you that information to contact that person directly. So that is our opportunity to communicate with an anonymous individual. It remains anonymous. It's only through that email portal that goes from us to that third party and then back to the city there. So I would encourage folks to use that opportunity as well. And the information, again, my apologies, I don't have the number memorized.
I have it. I got it. Public hotline 1-844-297-5947. Employee hotline 1-800-780-9554. Thankfully, I have my glasses on so I could see it.
Thank you. And
Thank you,
again,
Viola.
you can call it in individually, or if you prefer, you can enter it over the computer through one of those portal links. It all goes to a third-party vendor. It does not come to any city employee directly. Again, they compile the information, and then they send us the information that they collect from the complainant.
Thanks, Viola.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, yes, Councilor Flores.
Yes, I would like to ask our city manager to assure that we have publications in our newspaper, the bulletin probably, or online, whatever. But definitely have it known, the information go out frequently for the public to know that there is the hotline and the number. And it would just be something, just to publicize it. And I don't know what the frequency would be, but it would be, well, if it's a bulletin, it's once a week. And then it would give the Sun News something to print. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Flores. Okay, any public comment? Yes, please make your way down, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Hi, Senora Flores.
Hi. Good afternoon, city councilors, let's see, Mayor Pro Tem and City Manager Pili and Chief Strong. I am Maria Flores, and I have been coming since it's been over a year. And I see lots of improvement in language, in attitude, in effort. Thank you for the widening of the scope of everything. I did look quickly through the OIR report, and I'm just going to be a little, how would you say, repeat some things. You know, there are situations where more review is beneficial, absence of a thorough review was noteworthy, need to enhance officer performance, incomplete files, develop alternative complaints and resolution process. I like the part about the restorative justice. Just in case you don't know, Las Cruces Public Schools has been using restorative justice to keep the numbers down of expelling students. And so this is nothing new. It is something that is used widely in many situations, especially education. Also, the inappropriate use of social media. I was alarmed by that when I read it. Reduced investigation time. Sometimes it takes too long to get back. Improved codes of conduct, and the misuse of body cameras. It's prevalent everywhere. Keeping personal opinions to themselves as they are working a situation. And what I thought was missing was lack of professionalism by some of these individuals, lack of empathy. This is a critical piece. Lack of self-control, and a lack of understanding poverty. Sometimes the way that we talk to people that don't understand what's going on, that don't have a full capacity, that are hungry, that are upset, that's where we use de-escalation. We find better ways of addressing their needs without yelling at them, without using profanity. These are the things that trouble me. And in the end, we still don't have a place for citizen review. That is the only piece missing today. And however you see fit to include it, I ask of that again and again. I will not cease asking. So I appreciate your time, I appreciate the efforts, I appreciate the improvements, but we lack that one piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Senora Flores, for being here and for your comments. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Goodman.
Hello again. I think I'm still Peter Goodman, and I share the concern that was expressed about the select committee, but won't go into detail now. I think the sheer numbers of some of the complaints point to the problem that people are not using these systems. And what we all just said, let's publish something in the Sun News. Great idea. Let's put it online. Great idea. At the beginning of this meeting, somebody who was very interested asked me how he could find out what was in the OIR report. Well, it was online, but he don't know that. He may not have an email. From my general kinds of contacts with the community, and I'll bet that Councilor Bencomo could say the same from some of her work other than as a counselor. There are, and also from what I saw when I was working a bit, my part-time job in the municipal court, a lot of the people who might have complaints about the police, a lot of the people who deal with the police a lot, don't have an email. They're not looking online. Some of them are homeless. They have limited access to a computer and probably use that to call home or look for a job or whatever. So I think that points up what Ms. Flores and I and others have been saying about the need for a community outreach arm that really is community, not OIR, with all due respect, having quarterly meetings. A committee that people can find members they can speak to and bring something up to. And one other piece of that, the whole thing about I'm fully confident that if I had a complaint and I called to your anonymous hotline, that it would be anonymous. I trust you. But do you think the kind of people who are being mistreated or think they are being mistreated by police feel that way? They've heard there are things like caller ID. How do they know that caller ID isn't used on that hotline, and that the very police officer that they feel harassed them isn't learning their name and coming by their house later on? So I think we all tend to have less appreciation than we should for the distance between us and some of the people we might be trying to talk to. But thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Anybody else? See none, Council? Okay.
Sorry, Maria Flores again. I forgot to ask OIR and City Council if it would consider the hybrid model in the next possible, next time you work on a contract with them, to include citizens. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Okay. Senora Flores, yes, thank you. Okay, I think we have we have completed our 2 items, big items. Thank you very much. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Graham.
Second by Flores.
Motion made by Councilor Graham, second by Councilor Flores. Christine.
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Abeyta is absent. Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Cran is absent. Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
And Mayor is absent.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Christine, are we doing agenda setting? Christine? Christine? Are we doing agenda setting?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. This is the agenda memo setting for September 5th, 2023. 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent.
2, non-consent.
2 non-consent.
3, non-consent.
3 non-consent.
4, non-consent.
4 non-consent.
5, non-consent.
5 non-consent.
6, non-consent.
6 non-consent.
Thank you.
The Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley offers microchipping for $10.